All right, what's going on, YouTube? It's Belton here, attempting this for God knows how many times now. We are going to go over the new patch notes for the announcement of the third edict, the 0.3 patch now coming to Path of Exile 2 in the next just over a week. This video is probably going to be fairly long, but I've gone through like the first section of the patch notes, which I did in a live reaction earlier on Twitch, and then there were certain things that I got distracted by, like very specific interactions that I went on like an hour a long rant about why I thought there were oversights and whatnot, and then I needed to go for a cigarette break. And anyways, it just didn't make much of a video for YouTube content, so we're going to try starting this over here, try to streamline it a little bit. A lot of what I'll be reading will be my first time reading it, up until the part where they talk about Hinekora's locks and some of the crafting changes at the beginning of the patch notes. I kind of got sidetracked there. But I think I've set things up here in a way where we can go through this and maybe streamline some stuff, and I'll give thoughts about things I think are super OP, things that are kind of cool, some changes that are happening. Just read through this stuff and provide my insights where I think that they are pertinent. Obviously, with some of these things that are brand new and have no kind of proxy or approximation from a PoE 1 or PoE 2, you're going to need to see how they play out. Things that have like actual like raw numerical values that are new things or interactions that are pre-existing, naturally I can speak to those more acutely. I have been playing PoE 2 since the launch of it. I haven't taken a break in that time. Made, I don't know, 2 to 400 mirrors or something like that. 20, 30 mirror items. I have like 10 characters that are all above level 95. I've done mapping, I've done bossing, all that stuff. So I have a pretty good frame of reference for a lot of these things. Obviously not the experience I have in PoE 1, but granted, PoE 2 is a fairly new game, so hopefully there's some value to what I have to say going through here. And if you don't agree with me, that's fantastic. Some things are obviously opinion-based, some things are just raw math. But I know a lot of you guys, especially those of you who'll be watching on YouTube, have expressed some displeasure with the fact that I've been focusing on this and less on PoE 1, and a lot of people have been like, oh, PoE 2 is a dead game. Not that I'm expecting people to overtly say, I was wrong, sorry, every time I was kind of harassed about it. But I'm curious, though, to get some feedback from the people watching on YouTube, whether or not this is your first time, going through these things, watching this video, or if you've gone through it yourself. If your opinion has changed, are you more excited about it now? Do you think you're going to play? What stands out to you as a good, positive? What are you more ambivalent about? Just getting some general feedback, I think, would be interesting. If you haven't watched the release trailer or gone over at least the major points, I suggest doing that before watching here so you can have a good frame of reference for doing so. But I will go through everything, starting just with the broad scale announcement here, where it sort of gives categorical oversight. And then we'll also go through the exact patch notes. And then I also have the PoE 2 DB up for reference, because the PoE 2 DB has the individual things that were added that are mentioned at least within the patch notes, and you can hover over them and see them itemized. Just for a visual aid, I think that would be far less abstract than just referring to the things by their name and their numbers. So hopefully as a visual aid for those of you guys watching on YouTube when I post this eventually, you find that to be somewhat agreeable. As you can see, I changed the formatting for this video so that you guys can also see Twitch chat here. With my apologies to Twitch chat, as I said, I've been attempting this for like 12 hours now. I took a break at a certain point to eat, whatever. There's definitely been some difficulty in kind of streamlining this. For those of you that have been around the whole time, Godspeed. But the reason I included Twitch chat while I go through this is because a lot of this will be my first time reading through some of these notes. I thought it would be interesting to see other people's reactions. And for those of you guys watching on Twitch, if there's stuff that I've going through here, even if you've read it before, as I'm talking about different points, I would still, there be some value, I think, for you guys just letting me know and letting the people knowing watching on this YouTube how you feel about different things. Like if I get to something, even if you've already expressed this somewhere else, feel free to pipe up on every topic. I'm probably going to try and, just for the sake of the video, stay focused on what I'm doing here, but I do think there's some value to being able to see people's interpretations of different additions, revisions, and subtractions in various areas. So feel free to express yourself throughout. Hopefully this doesn't backfire on me having the live stuff there, but the things, for those of you guys watching on YouTube, the chat that you see on the top is my Twitch as it's happening live. So that's obviously something new to this video here. All right. Now, let's go through it at first. So the third edict, again, launching this week. The story continues with Act 4. So they're adding a new act, and then I think the long-term goal is to have 6 acts with no repetition, as opposed to the current 3 that is doubling up, in order to kind of stop gap or fill the gap between what will eventually be 6 acts. You only have to do the act 1 through 4 one time, and then what will eventually be act 5 and 6 is being filled in by some filler thing. I forget the exact terminology they have for it, but we're only going to have to do the acts once. I think that's probably not a downside to anybody there. Explore the islands of... I'm not getting debated into saying that word. I'm sure it's probably not pronounced the way that my mind's eye is saying it right now, but fucking GGG. All right. So it's got a new zone associated with it. Challenge and new bosses. Too much yapping, old man. Start the review. Okay, challenge new bosses. Act 4 introduces more than a dozen new bosses, more than 100 new monster types. Cool. New bosses, new conflicts, always good thing here. More diversity. Three new mini acts. So this is what I was just referencing there with the stopgap stuff. These kinds of things, obviously, just having them referred to here, we're not really going to be able to express an opinion until you go through it the first time. The rise of the new Abyssal League. Abyss is a mechanic from PoE 1. Those of you who played PoE 1 will probably have a fairly reasonable frame of reference for those. It does look like it's implemented somewhat differently, but yeah, the league mechanic with Dawn of the Hunt, that really wasn't what a traditional league is. If you are playing PoE 2 exclusively, typically leagues have league exclusive content that is then added to the core game in most cases. In some cases, league content is overtuned or undertuned, and they decide it's just not a core feature that they're going to add. Generally speaking, though, in the 4-month league or the 3-month league, the duration of the league, it will only exist there. And then at the end of that league, aside from the fact you get a fresh economy every 3 to 4 months, the league mechanic will be league exclusive. And then when the league ends, it'll migrate towards standard league, the permanent league. And typically they will, then add whatever that league mechanic was to some extent or different parts of it to the game. A lot of the time, the league mechanics, there's clever ways that people figure out to take advantage of them that GGG didn't really think of at first that are like super OP. And so a lot of the time, league mechanic stuff specifically will end up becoming legacy because the stuff that is like too strong with respect to borrowed power or power creep, they tend to kind of try to bring into balance of what they want for the game overall. And so it's often a very good idea, even if you are somebody who plays standard or doesn't have the time maybe to think you don't have the time to commit to making new characters every league. Strangely enough, almost or paradoxically, one of the best ways to actually make money in standard, if that is your priority, is to actually play leagues. So aside from the fact you get all this new content, the vast majority of people will play new leagues as opposed to standard. And also you can build your long-term wealth by acquiring things in there. So for anyone who's new to the game or the franchise in general, I highly recommend engaging with the league mechanics. Seal the Abyss. So this is just explaining how Abyss works. As you can see here, this looks reminiscent to PoE 1, but again, I'll probably experience it in the game more so than just reading it before really commenting on that. The Well of the Souls, I thought this was interesting. For those of you who played PoE 1, this is basically veiled modifiers. This was associated with Betrayal or June. And you'll be familiar with Ashling mods or the Veiled Chaos or Veiled Exalt. That is effectively carbon copied what this is here. They've used different ways to, what do they call it in this? Desecrated modifiers. Desecrated modifiers, by all appearances, are simply veiled modifiers. You get this like hieroglyphic text that you then unveil, and then you're given 3 options. Some of these, if you look on these gloves here, the attacks gain 15% of damage as extra lightning. That is obviously a veiled or a desecrated only modifier. So all indications are that this will work very similarly, minus the obviously in PoE 1 you have a crafting bench where you get like a lesser version when you gain the unveiled modifiers. But so this is adding exclusive modifiers that otherwise wouldn't have existed. So that has broad-reaching applications. Obviously it gives itemization diversity, but as well it does allow you to have, like in the current implementation of PoE, there are no exclusive modifiers, right? Every item just has its list of prefixes and suffixes. And so this will allow for there to be a whole new, like, for every additional modifier you add a possible variant to an item. So the implications for that with like very high end items, it just, it provides a lot more functionality and diversity there, and there's not always definitive best in slots. And it also changes the process of like ladder crafting significantly. There's cool ways to take advantage of these usually, and sort of multifaceted ways in which you can sort of synergistically apply exclusive modifiers to different items and whatnot. And that whole process is kind of one of the fun things when they introduce new crafting mechanics or leagues too. New bosses and pinnacle, and a new pinnacle. Dive into the abyssal deeps. That's cool. And you see here some of the items that they have indicated will drop. This one I think is quite noteworthy. It's a belt with charm slots, and then this item gains bonuses from socketed items as though it was body armor. Presumably that line of text can be rolled to all different base or equipment pieces. So boots, gloves, all the ones that can have sockets. So boots, gloves, weapons, offense, foci, whatever. And each one of those, like if you go in the game, you'll notice that like runes and talismans and what do you call them? Runes, talismans, and what's the other thing? The soul cores. Like these ones only apply to a helmet, right? This one applies, you've got martial weapon. This one applies to gloves. These apply to body armors. Then they all have varying degrees of strength and unique applications. So you'll be able to presumably get different variants of this belt that can have any one of those applied to it. Not only that, but then the current version of the game where you have like the 100% effective socketed items that exists as a essence mod on gloves and boots. It appears that you're getting that effect, and it says socketed items, so it's not exclusive to just runes and stuff. And this is going to matter because if you look at the next item, you can see here you've got a new thing being added called an Abyssal Eye, which appears to be a new version of a socketed item. This one is crazy strong. Critical hit chance is lucky against parried enemies. Prevent 3% of damage from deflected hits. We'll cover what deflected hits are in a bit. And then helmets +1 to accuracy rating per 1 item evasion equipped on the helmet. So that's pretty crazy because you can see that when it's applied to a helmet slot, right, you could put this into this belt, right? If you had to, this item gains bonuses from socketed items as though it was a helmet. And then that would make it so that you get, assuming that this rolls up to 100%, you could then get 2 accuracy per 1 item evasion on equipped helmet. You get like 1,000 evasion on a helmet. So you get 2,000 flat accuracy from 1 socket. Crazy. So there's lots of cool interactions these things kind of have. I love when they add items like this where they're layered like that. This new Omen here allows you to unveil essentially a veiled mod twice. People that have experience with veiled mods in PoE. Sorry, for people who have only played PoE 2, if I say veiled modifier, I mean desecrated modifier. The nomenclature I'm just used to, having done it like hundreds of thousands of times, is PoE 1's veiled version, which again is betrayal associated, but these effectively look to be the same thing. But yeah, this Omen seemingly allows you, so when you unveil the thing like this and you're given a list of 3 options, there's usually a potential, like let's say there's 15 total veiled modifiers or desecrated modifiers. You're not guaranteed to get the unveil that you want, but you have to pick one and then it applies it. Now you can always annul off that modifier and try it again, but the fact that this Omen allows you to unveil it twice naturally is going to highly increase your probability and your chance to unveil what it is that you want. Usually the process of having to get a veiled modifier is rather time consuming or expensive. And so just doubling up on that's fantastic for most people. And it's a cool way to have omens interact with new things. I think that's great. And another thing too, that for those of you who have never played PoE 1, when you're dealing with mods like this, like let's say you have a suffix that's open and you get a veiled suffix or a desecrated suffix, you can like, oh no, there's no crafting bench. But the mods that you have on there can potentially block the unveiled mods. So let's say that it was possible to unveil, as it shows here, Chaos Res. If I had Chaos Res already as a suffix, then it wouldn't be possible to get Chaos Res on there. So you can kind of like strategically have your item with pre-existing modifiers to prevent the unveiling of the modifiers that you don't want, so that you have a higher chance of the ones you do want. If you're trying to like fracture a veiled or a desecrated mod, for example, you could do that strategically and implement things like that too. So that's pretty cool. I think that's overall just a big W there. Not really too much of a downside I see on that. It's cool. The introduction of exclusive modifiers really adds a lot of diversity to crafting, and a much more like when your decision is kind of made for you, like there's a very clear best in slot and a very simple binary with no potential opportunity cost or mutual exclusivity with something else. That's generally speaking kind of a bad thing, because there's so many people vying over after like such specific items that it tends to get saturated quite quickly. And because the game is progressive and because there's no soulbound items, you just increasingly get a gear floor that can often depreciate non-sophisticates item value quite significantly. But adding things like this adds again some more player agency to the process of this, and more of a decision-making process, and having more decisions or more possibilities available in any decision you make in the game, I think is always a good thing. It's obviously overwhelming if you're starting from zero, but naturally you're going to learn things over time, and as you come to learn more and more things, you'll be very appreciative of the options that you get presented at a certain point, even if they are overwhelming at first. Another thing it looks like they're adding is sprint. Sprint is just basically in between combat. You can run faster, similar mechanic to dodge, where you hold the space bar or whatever, except they mentioned that if you do get hit when you're sprinting, you get knocked down. I don't know if knockdown has anything to do with stun, or if you can get immune to it in any kind of way, but effectively you can move faster in between mob packs. I think a lot of people will be happy about that. New support gem systems are being added. This one's really cool. Currently, you have tier 1, 2, and 3 uncut gems supports, right? But those don't really relate so much to the power of those gems. They're kind of just sort of arbitrary. They're adding a system where there's actual tiers of support gems now. So, like, let's say tier 1 gives 20% more, tier 2 might give 25% more, tier 3 might give 30% more. And so you've got that incentive there to kind of scale those up. And on top of that, now you're going to be able to use support gems more than once, so on different skills. However, you're not going to be able to use the same main skill more than once. So a bit of a trade-off there. And then that's a overwhelmingly good thing here. And then they are adding as well what in PoE 1 would be kind of like awakened gems, like drop-only gems that are kind of chase items. Some of these are absolutely crazy, and we'll get to those in a bit. So there's new balance changes and skills, new clusters on the tree, new notables, new keystones, rebalancing and tweaking of some of the numerical values, some mechanical changes. Obviously, this is a lot to cover here, but it's always good when they're paying due attention to this and not just stacking on new content that becomes ever and ever stronger while disregarding the pre-existing stuff. I don't think that while people might be excited at first to play something like a new class, if that new class is overwhelmingly like overpowered relative to what's pre-existing, the longevity of each league is severely hampered. So you've seen this in Dawn of the Hunt at first, like something like 60% of all characters were Amazons, to the point that a lot of people felt like they were missing out if they weren't playing one. Again, in a game that is hallmarked by its infinitude of possibility and its customization, when you have a scenario where the player base at large, whether real or imagined, feels like they have to do something, I think that should always be a moment for pause and reflection on GGG's part. So I'm glad that they've decided to rebalance a bunch of this stuff, and as well as adding new things too. It's always cool to interact with new stuff, right? And here's the thing that most of you are probably watching this video for me to comment on. They've made some crafting updates. Again, I did start reading this part earlier. Hey, is anyone in Twitch chat right now? Who was here when I was when I started reading about crafting earlier? I had thoughts. All right, YouTube, I had some thoughts, and I think for me to properly articulate those thoughts and in a painful, very Belton-esque execution of trying to share my thoughts on something to an audience that perhaps was not receptive or didn't understand the downstream consequences of some of the things, I then spent like 8 hours trying to drive a single point home that most people thought was erroneous to begin with. So we're trying this video again, and I'll try and be a little bit more concise on those topics when we get to them. But they've added some new crafting mechanics. They've added some updates to current ones. Essences now have various tiers, and they also have, again, some essence-only modifiers, which is they had that in PoE 1. As you can see here, this one, the perfect essence can add damage added as extra on weapons. That's obviously not available inherently on them. Well, it is on wands, but not on melee weapons. And so that's cool. New options there. The similar kind of feedback or thoughts as I had with the unveiled or the desecrated modifiers. It just adds more diversity and more agency to the players, more customization options, and more potential for various different best in slots. Having a singular best in slot is a very bad thing. I'm not going to go down this rant again, but in PoE 1, one of the reasons why there's such a longevity to the crafting is because you have mutual exclusivities or considerations. Like if you make a synthesis item, that item cannot be influenced. If it's influenced, it can't be synthesized. If it's fractured, it can only be eldritch. If it's eldritch, it can't be synthesis or influence, and vice versa. And they all have these trade-offs, right? So sometimes it's not just a matter of like raw currency, but the opportunity cost of every choice having an inverse like, you know what I mean? Like by making this, you're not getting this. If there's just a singular list of what is best, right? And like, no matter what, this is always the best option. Not only does that market tend to get saturated very quickly, but it also allows there to be a power and currency aggregation very quickly by motivated, typically groups of people, often for whom success within the game is not their top priority. So adding things like this where you can have modifiers that are otherwise unavailable, where it's like, all right, this one's got attack speed, but this one's got extra fire damage. Depending on what version of build you're playing, either one of those could be best in slot. And so just having the option to have different variants of a similar item type is incredibly important for the economy's function at large. So, and I'm not going to go down a deep rabbit hole on why that's the case, because I did that earlier, but that's a good thing for sure. Another crafting update here. They've added new omens, new ritual content to remove older ones. So Omen of the Ancients, this is like, they have an omen for this in PoE 1. I forget what the name of it is, but it will guarantee that if you use a chance orb, you get a same unique of the same item class. When it says item class, I don't know if that means base type, or like, for example, if you use a heavy belt, will it be a heavy belt unique, or will it just be a guaranteed belt unique? Because those are different things. The specific base type would work like the Omen does in PoE 1, and that can actually be super OP because some really strong bases, some really strong uniques are like if it's the only unique that's available on that base type, then it's a guarantee to hit that, right? And if that is ever the case, it also causes the cost of the Omen to go up like exponentially, because it's always going to be priced at the most expensive version of a unique it can be made. Regardless of, like, if the most expensive unique that Omen can get turned into is like a 50 div unique, then the Omen's going to cost like 48 divs, even though for 99% of use cases, the average ROI on using one might be like 1 div. It'll always be priced to the best option. So they're cool in the sense that if you find them, it does that, but they can be somewhat limiting if it's guaranteed in that say. But if it's like item class, where it means like if I do it on a belt, I get a version of a belt, then that would kind of work like a hybrid version of the pre-existing Omen in PoE 1 and like an Ancient Orb in PoE 1, where an Ancient Orb changes, like if I use an Ancient Orb on a unique belt, it changes it to a different unique belt. And then you also have to factor in things like weighting. Like if it does change it to a unique belt, is it just a random one? Like if there's 100 belts, each belt has a 1% chance, or does it factor in the tiered weighting of that unique? So there, again, not to overly delve on this one specific Omen, but this is one of those things that we'll have to test out in the game to find out its functionality, because there's lots of implications to how that could be potentially used. This one right here, all right, chat, don't let me go down on it again. Mark my words, YouTube and Twitch chat. This item right here is either going to make or break the game in combination with Hinekora's luck, which we'll get to in a bit. How this is actually implemented will either ruin or make this league. And I need to fight against myself to fully explain this whole out. I'm sorry, people on YouTube. I could literally talk about this for like 6 hours. But here's the important part as a TLDR. Here, this is from the video release. All right. Sanctifying an item will randomize the numeric values of its modifiers and then multiply the values of those modifiers by a random value range from 80% to 120%. So effectively what this means, if you're familiar with how vol orbs can impact unique items currently, right, where it can go from 78 to 122, it's the same thing but for rare items. Now the first part of it, where it says randomize the numeric values of its modifiers, the modifiers are locked by their tier. So like if I have tier 1 physical damage, merciless, that's 170 to 179. So the first thing it does is it randomizes within that tier. So let's say it picks 170 out of 179. It would then multiply that 170 by a random value from between 0.8 to times 1.2. And so that means that there's 41 options there, assuming that 0 is one of them. And so in that case I just mentioned with 170 to 179, that's 10 possible integer values times 41. So that one modifier would have a 1 in 410 chance of rolling at its absolute maximum, which would be 179 times 1.22, right, which is 218. So that single line of that single modifier on, like, let's say a perfect mirror item could change the merciless rule from 179 to 218. Which, as you can imagine, if you extrapolate that over an entire item, if they're all tier 1 items and all of those tier 1 modifiers get multiplied by 1.2, you're talking about some pretty crazy items. In particular, because they haven't mentioned this yet, but in the patch notes, they've also added items that can drop with 30 quality as a base, and they've added bases that can drop with an extra socket, an extra base socket. So let's say you get a bow. Bows can normally have 2 sockets. They can drop with 3 sockets or be corrupted to having 4. And they can also have 30 quality. So, and they can also be multiplied by times 1.2. So I just did some math for you guys here when I was explaining this for the YouTube folks. I was explaining what this could do to a single item. If you guys are aware, I crafted a mirror spear this league, all right? So if you have a spike spear that has tier 1 fizz, tier 1 fizz, tier 1 fizz, so fizz, flat, hybrid, and percentage, and you have it with a 25% fizz rune, and then your suffixes are 5% crit chance, 39 crit bonus, and 28% attack speed, that will have 1,044 PDPS with 11.5 crit and 39 crit bonus. If I took that exact same item and I were to do it on a base that had 30% quality and a second socket, which I would put another 25% fizz rune in, and then I were to use a Sanctified Omen on it and divine it, and that changed it to be times 1.2, that same spear, which is already a mirror spear, keep in mind, a perfect mirror spear, perfectly divined with all tier 1 mods, would have 1,044. With the addition of just the base type and the Sanctified modifier, it would go to 1,647 PDPS with 12.5% base crit and 47% crit bonus. That would translate to probably at least 70 to 75% more damage, total damage. And that is just covering the addition of a base change and 1 omen. Now, here is the part that is going to, in my opinion, make or break how this league transpires. And it's the next part that's important. The resulting item will now be sanctified. Okay, so that means, like, similar to how items have corruption or corrupted or mirrored items are mirrored, it gets a tag and it gets a status associated with it. So, like, corrupted items can't be altered at all. Mirrored items, they can't be crafted either. Right? And so, but this is the part that is interesting and that they have not expanded upon. And this, in my opinion, is what is going to make or break this. Most methods of item crafting and modification cannot be used on sanctified items. And here's the part that's kind of a mind fuck. if I were to have to guess what most items would refer to, if they were to pick any random items that could be used, I would think that the items that could be used would be vol orbs and mirrors. Because you could say, well, there's so much variability, possibility with a sanctified orb just being able to be used on a divine, and presumably that sanctified orb, because it then makes it sanctified, couldn't be divined again. So you've only got one shot at sanctify orbing, or sorry, using a sanctified omen and divining it. So like, what are the chances of getting, like, it'd be 1 in millions to get that perfectly done? And that would be correct. But Hinekora's locks exist. And so, what if you used Hinekora's locks and then you modified the item with a different orb to get rid of the lock? Because the only thing that triggers the sanctification is a divine orb. So if you used anything else, you could reapply the lock and get a different outcome. You could force it to be perfect. It would take a lot of currency, but it's not that hard to get currency, especially for people that are, motivated to do so, especially through means outside of the game. If that item can be mirrored, that is going to be that's going to have a lot of negative consequences. However, if sanctification makes it so that a mirror cannot be used, I am going to take my hat off and I'm going to say, tip of the cap, GGG, you just fixed mirror crafting. I obviously am supremely advantaged by mirror crafting, but frankly, a lot of the time it's miserable and I hate it, but it's just so much better than everything else because you turn it, an asset into an income source, and you have to compete against people that are working in groups because you're incentivized to aggregate resources, and a lot of people are forced to cheat, and then the aggregation of those resources are then used to pool and to buy all of them, like essentially means of production. So all of the omens and crafting materials used to make them so that they can snowball them. And then once you have control of all of these passive income sources that other people can't afford to craft from a cost accounting basis, because they're looking at it just like an asset, not as an income source, because they're not looking to get services off of it. So obviously somebody that's looking at it from a service standpoint doesn't need to take basic cost accounting into consideration, because they're not looking like, if you're a normal person, if an item costs 1,000 divs to craft, but you could just, it only sells for 500 divs, why would you ever craft it? But if you know that you can turn that into something that can generate you like 200 divs a day because somebody will service it, then you're probably going to be willing, like it's multiple in terms of its base crafting cost no longer factors in. And so you have people that are disproportionately and differently incentivized to value those items, but also they become the single largest wealth generators in the game, because then people, once you have one of them, if you do it early enough, and again, because GGG has put PoE in a position where the only barrier or the only the bottleneck to being able to achieve these things now is currency, because trading has no friction in it. The currency exchange makes it immediate, and there's no time sink. The crafting is just a process of left click or right click. It even highlights the mods for you. So if you can buy an infinite amount of omens, an infinite amount of locks, and an infinite amount of currency items, you can make this perfect item, and then you can buy all of the crafting currencies to price other people out of it from a cost accounting perspective, and then basically force them to be, for people who want to have this higher tier of items, to become customers for your services, which you can then use to aggregate pretty much all of the wealth to price people out. And like, what people don't seem to understand is it's not the problem with the services themselves, it's that the proceeds of those services are what affect the normal person. Because eventually, after you aggregate and have like a singular control of all of these assets that are also generating income, not only is there the appreciating value of the asset itself, but the passive income coming from people who are making copies of it. And then the income that comes from those copies are used to price people out from the creation of the other ones, which they then use to create more of them. And once they've created and cornered all of those, they start to buy all of the other things in the market that have high value. Megalomaniacs, double or corrupted unique items, things like temporalis, ingenuities, like the reason why people can never afford to buy omens, and the reason why people can't get the cool chase uniques It's not because, and like, you ever sit in a map and you're like, I mapped for 100 hours and I only made 10 divs. This is why this happens. Because it's not the 95% of people that play, quote unquote, play the game. It's the 0.1% of 0.1% of people that understand what I'm talking about, that disproportionately control many of the valuable and appreciating assets within the game. That is just, I said I wasn't going to go into this. This is actually me being brief. Anyways, my point is, Omen of Sanctification, as I just showed you here, most methods of item crafting and modification cannot be used on sanctified items. Now, why is this important and why is this like a big kind of inflection point? A lot of people draw parallels to corrupted modifiers. Incorrect. Corrupted mods say corrupted items cannot be modified again. Cannot be modified. And again, sanctified items are most methods of item crafting and modification cannot be used. If, now again, this is a major thing. I know a lot of you probably won't appreciate this, but this is honestly one of the biggest things like more than offline trading. One of two directions here will have a bigger impact. One of these two directions will have a bigger impact on the game. And I know probably none of you will appreciate this, and the ones that will understand what I'm saying probably aren't going to be watching my videos in the first place, certainly not commenting on them. But if they make it so that these items cannot be mirrored, so that a mirror of Calandra becomes one of the currency items, as it says here, item crafting and modification, most of them cannot be used. Again, a Vol Orb cannot be mirrored. Corrupted items cannot be modified. A corrupted item cannot be mirrored. If a sanctified item cannot be mirrored, revolutionary. Revolutionary. I'll explain why in a minute. If they can be mirrored, every single problem I just expressed in as brief as a way as I can is going to be magnified to the nth degree. And the wealth gap is going to be bigger than ever. Ever. And I could maybe make a separate video explaining why that will happen, because it is, well, to me, it's not like, I think it's fairly obvious, but it took a while to explain it through on Twitch. But we will see how it's implemented. Yeah, you love it. In the video, Mark said sanctified items cannot be crafted just like corrupted ones. That's just false. I love both those guys, but they misspeak all the time. If that were the case, they would be worded the same. They're not worded the same. A corrupted orb, and again, the wording in PoE is far, like how things are written in their functionality. They're a lot of the time they change things because they have oversights. The wording of a corrupted modifier is corrupted items cannot be modified. The wording of a sanctified is most methods of item crafting and modification cannot be used. Those are two different things. Now, if they can also be voled afterwards, that's also really, I'm cool with that. Because, and the difference is here, sorry, I really didn't want to focus on this. I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. If a sanctified item cannot be mirrored, then that means that a mirror item will no longer be the single best item in the game. And it's not like mirror services won't exist as a result, but it means, as I was talking about there, if you look at an asset as an income source, then the valuation that you can put onto that asset itself is going to be far outside of its basic cost accounting or, perfect elasticity in a market that solely responded to supply and demand, which this one doesn't, but in an idealistic sense. Basically, to wit, if an item costs 5,000 divs, that's the crafting cost on average. So the probabilities, which are fixed, and the material costs, which are obviously evolving, but let's say you get to a point where they're fairly stabilized. If it's 5,000 divs, if you can turn that into a serviceable item, I can pay 20,000 divs knowing that the lifetime value of that item will exceed that. But a normal person, 99.9% of people, they know that that's a 5,000 whatever item. So the fact that they sell for 20,000 is crazy, right? They're not going to be able to compete in the market with the person willing to pay 20,000 because their perspective on it is different. And because of that, the people who are willing to pay that premium are going to be able to aggregate all of those items. And you might think that that boxes you out on them, but it's again, it's not the items themselves. It's not the people who can afford mirror services or that have the mirror items. It's what, once they do get control of all of them, what they then use the proceeds that having them, what they use those proceeds for. And that is what prices people out of basically everything in the game. And it's why you see such a dramatic price jump in like perfect corrupted items and things like mirrors. Like mirrors start off at like 300 divs, that they're like 3,500 divs at the end of a league. Exalts start at like 20 to a divine, and then they're like 2,000 to a divine. There's other factors at play, but that's a really, really big one. And it's also what, like, almost entirely what fuels a lot of the RMT websites and the illicit play in the game. And so if sanctified items are mirrorable, and because it's going to take a very layered approach to get there, but it's still fully deterministic because they added locks and because they have omens that do so, and the new crafting currencies have item level things on them. So like a perfect chaos orb guarantees that you get at least an item level 50 modifier. When you combine that with an Omen of Whittling, which also picks the lowest modifier to do, and then you combine that with a dextral or sinestral erasure, which then further targets a prefix or suffix. If you look at something like a spear, the total weighting pool on a spear is like 50, or what is it, like 45 or 55,000, and 82% of those modifiers are below item level 50 because the lower item level mods have higher weights. And so if you leave your last mod to something like flaring, where there's only 3 modifiers that are above item level 50, the modifier that was a 100 out of 45,000 weight all of a sudden becomes a 100 out of an 8,000 weight, and within its own tier itself, it becomes like a 1 in 5. It just, that in of itself is not problematic, but it's the synergistic way in which being able to make things that have no possible fail state, because you put in assurances that can essentially like provide insurance for your item, where it doesn't guarantee an outcome, but it guarantees that you don't lose progress, right? That means that you only have to get a perfect base one time. You only have to hit the fracture one time, right? And because of that, you're going to be able to disproportionately value those individual items. And the only barrier to making them is currency. Then it's obviously going to encourage and incentivize people to pool together currency far outside of its quote-unquote real value, to be able to make them as fast as possible so that they can effectively control what is essentially a zero-sum market with mirror crafting. And then once they do have a single one of them, that singular asset and the singular income source that comes from that one item can then be used to control large swaths of the market, not just the mirror items, not just the mirror services, normal items, normal crafting currencies. Like, it's the reason why omens were 15 to a mirror in PoE, the first early access league. All right. Using an omen to change one modifier one time to like a tier 1 is like a 1 in 50. And yet for some reason in the first early access league, you could only get 15 omens for a mirror. So it's like, for me to change one mod on my, like, which, you know, let's say a ring has 6 mods. To change one mod to a tier 1, I've got to spend 3.5 mirrors. Or I could just buy a mirror and mirror a perfect one that's already made for like 200 div fee. That means I'm going to spend only 500 divs instead of having to spend like, 20,000. Of course, I'm just going to pay the guy the fee, right? Now, that doesn't matter so much in that vacuum, but when everyone's doing that, the capacity for those people to compound upon those resources and then start buying all of the unique items, all of the crafting materials, all of the locks, all of the the chase items. It's what happens every time, because then they list them on the RMT websites, and it's either like, okay, I can farm for 6,000 hours here, I can quit the game, or I can RMT to feasibly be able to afford this. It encourages people to do so, and then they're the people who sell you the mirrors, and then you go back and use those same mirrors to mirror the items that they have. Like, they win on both ends. It's a dark side of the game, but it is very real. And again, I know I said I wasn't going to go too in depth on this, but how this ends up working can literally make or break what I just talked about. If they make it so you can't mirror them, then instead of valuing assets as an income source, right? So you're gonna have people that you're gonna have to value it at its face value, right? So like if it costs, like the cost accounting to make a perfect item is still gonna be like dozens of, like multiple mirrors, right? But you're not gonna have a situation where something is being sold for 10 times its actual cost, like its average crafting cost, in a way that people who are just looking at it for the value of that item can't possibly participate in, or have a shot at owning one. And also mirror services, right? They don't have to constantly drop like lower the drop rate on mirrors, and you don't have to freak out about mirrors forever being the best item in the game, because by design rare items are always the best items in the game. And if a mirror can make a perfect copy, or sorry, if a mirror can make an exact copy of any rare item, then it's not like a situation like Headhunter and Mageblood, where you can take a really strong item like Headhunter, which forever was considered the best unique in the game, and then just add a new unique that has a stronger effect, and all of a sudden Headhunters are no longer a whatever, right? The mirror is always like that baseline, because it always, no matter what is added to the game, what mods, what crafting currencies, it always makes that exact copy. But if you change the paradigm, if you make it so that you incentivize people to make perfect items, but then to make the actual best items, it can no longer be crafted upon, right? That encourages, first of all, people to make their own shit, but it doesn't allow people to operate. It's just a very good thing. I feel like I'm probably going to circle around the same points here. Anyways, I know that some of you in chat on Twitch are saying that it's the same thing as a corrupted mod. They said so. No shots at those guys, but they misspeak all the time. And frankly, if that were the way it worked exactly, then it would be worded exactly the same. The fact that it's worded differently means it works differently. I don't know exactly. Obviously, they would. So hopefully when they say it works like a corrupted mod, that means it can't be mirrored. But it obviously can have some, like the way, again, sorry, just to pull it up again. It says most methods of item crafting and modification cannot be used. And what would that possibly refer to? What would be a sensible, because obviously some kind of crafting material could be used on it. So what would be the only ones that would make sense? Like the only ones to me that make any sense at all would be a vol orb or a mirror. A mirror to reward you for the fact that you've already sanctified it and it can't be changed again because you're taking that risk, or a vol orb because it makes it corrupted. I looked at the in-game wording of corrupted. It's the same as sanctified. I'm literally, it's not. Corrupted items cannot be modified. Anyways, we'll move on. Where was I? So yeah, I'm very anxious to see how this plays out. Again, from my perspective, this is a really, really impactful one. The next thing here, Omen of Chaotic Monsters. This allows you to apply omens that impact waystones. That's one of the cool things too. And again, this is another thing that is a radical change. I actually really, really don't like that they added this personally. I know for a lot of people that they'll like this, but in my opinion, this actually ruined crafting in PoE 1 because it changed what used to be like a pursuit of passion, and you needed to have like a large commitment. And you could also have people that were willing to put in like an extreme amount of time to achieve a goal that could compete with people like TFT or people working with a guild or a stream or whatever, because it did require a different vector. Hinekora's locks allowed it so that you could just bypass all of that with currency. And as a result of that, you no longer had individual crafters making individual items. 99% of all high-end crafts were being done by groups of people. And as a result of that, again, wealth was aggregated to smaller and smaller groups. And, the people that impacted most are the people that are least capable of understanding the reasons why. So it's sort of it's a hard thing to articulate. But a lot of people at face value, I think, will enjoy the fact that locks are on there. Because locks allow you to hover over an item. The way that a lock works, sorry, if you didn't play PoE 1, when you apply to an item, the item like turns purple, and then whatever crafting currency you have, so let's say right here, I've got this chest place, right? Let's say I took a chaos orb and I right click it, right? And I hover over, right? The purple text would then appear and it would tell me exactly what that chaos orb would do. So it would show me the modifier that was getting removed and it would show me the modifier that was getting added. Let's say it was a bad result, right? I don't have to use the chaos orb, but I could then hover with a vol orb. I hover with the vol orb, and until you actually click and decide to choose the Hinekora's lock prediction outcome, it doesn't remove the lock. So you can hover over it with literally every crafting currency to see what the outcome it would have given was. And then if you don't like the outcome that it gives, you can just use any modification to the item at all will remove the Hinekora's lock. So for example, you can have an item that has 0 quality, and I want to find out, like, I want to like exalt my last mod on there, right? I can add like an armorer scrap to get rid of the lock, and then I can apply a new lock, and then I hover with the exalt again, and I'm gonna get a different outcome. It's not like it's fixed. Each new lock will give you new possibilities without actually having to click. And so that's really cool. Like it also applies to like vol orbs too, so you can hover over. You can do these on unique items. Sorry, another thing to point out: sanctified omens. Even though it's an omen that works with divine orbs, right? So the omen makes it so that a divine basically does the impact of a vol orb, but it can only be used on rare items. You can't use this on a unique. Hinekora's locks can be applied to uniques though, so you can predict the outcome of a vol orb. So if you have a really say a really expensive unique, like say I don't know what would be cost a mirror as a unique item, but let's say there's a mirror item you paid a mirror for, sorry, a unique item you paid a mirror for. You could put a lock on it, then hover with a vol orb to see like if it was going to get the times 1.22 or the enchant, and if it didn't, again you could remove the lock and then you could do whatever. A plague leash, utility belt. Here you can. Oh yeah, so you can see there that little purple indicator on the bottom. That means that it has a lock applied to it. And again, the lock gets removed the second the item is changed in any way. But locks can be repeatedly added, and you can repeatedly get predictive outcomes shown to you over and over across all different currency items that are applicable. The only time that you can't is when the crafting UI has its own like separate crafting UI. So like in PoE 1, you can't use a lock for like beast crafting or recombinators or harvest or the bench crafts because it's not a this sounds silly, but the process in which you can actually find out what it'll show you is if you can right click an item, hover with that currency item, and then hover over, that is like the mechanical interaction. If it's something like you have to come to like the recombinator and place it in there, it can't predict that outcome because you're not hovering with an actual currency item. So anything that you can like hover with, like where you right click it and then it becomes like its little own icon like that, and then you hover over, that's how it distinguishes which ones can be used with it or not. Another thing they added as well is they added different tiers of crafting currencies. So you can see here, upgrades a normal item to magic with 1 modifier. The minimum modifier level is 55. If you don't know how that works, actually, if you don't know how item levels work, I'm pretty sure you probably would have clicked off this video some time ago. But in case there's some sicko here, item level, like every item has different mods on it. So like on this one here, you can see it's got tier 1. Tier 1 energy shield, tier 1 energy shield, tier 1 ES, and then Jack of all trades, which is also like tier 1 or a T0 because it's a unique mod thing. And then this one here is tier 6. The lower a tier is, the lower its item level is typically. So the higher tier, so the better mods will have higher item level requirements. So if you have like this base item here, which is a vial robe, it's item level 82, which gives the full access to all of the modifier tiers and all of the modifiers. But if this were like a vial robe that were like item level 65, then any of the modifiers that required item level 66 or higher would not be available on that. So I could still get energy shield, but I couldn't get tier 1 energy shield. Now, by using these new crafting currencies, it removes the most common modifiers and the worst modifiers. Why this is incredibly important, and by itself is actually a really cool idea, because this is going to make mid-range crafting a lot easier. That's definitely the biggest absence. Right now, there's basically a direct binary between Omen crafting and then like single-use cheap currency crafting, where it's like you're either just YOLOing an item, you're buying an item off the trade site, or you're spending hundreds of divs to make an item with like full determinism and intentionality. And like there's like not really anything in between. The addition of these does allow for some more middle ground there. But the problem, really actually the single problem, I don't think they should have added a Chaos Orb. If they did all of these crafting currencies, so you can see they did it with Transmutes, Augs, Regals, Exalts, Chaos. If they excluded Chaos Orbs, this would have been perfect. The fact that they added Chaos Orbs, though, means that you're going to be able to combine a Chaos Orb with an Omen of Whittling, and combine that Omen of Whittling with an Omen of Sinestral or Dextral Erasure, and now you're able to guarantee that the lowest item level modifier that is a prefix is going to get changed by a single orb that then also removes 85% of the worst modifiers. And if you end up getting a modifier that's a higher item level than your second modifier, and you don't want that there because it quote-unquote bricks the item, no worries. You can use a Hinekora's Lock and an Annulment Orb. But you can also combine that Annulment Orb and that Hinekora's Lock with a Sinestral Annulment in that case. So now you've only got a 1 in 3, and then you can remove it and bring it back. It's just... It's not necessarily a bad thing to have more levels of determinism. It's the fact that you can do it infinitely without any potential risk that concerns me. I know these concerns will probably largely not be shared by the audience, but yeah, I've said my piece on that largely anyways. Again, if they just didn't have it for Chaos Orbs, I think this would be perfect, but this is a cool idea. And then we already talked about essences. Okay, new items. They've got new unique items. Yep, Totemic Raid Club, Thunderfist, Utility Wraps. These are all cool. I'm assuming you guys can read, so I'm not going to... Whatever. New endgame maps. They've added some new maps to the game. New endgame encounters, so they've added some more valuable and difficult bosses. And they now have Uber bosses, too, I believe. And Lineage support gems. Lineage support gems are fucking ridiculous. I need to get a glass of water in a second because I've been ranting for like an hour straight now. And, the risk is spending 500 div. Okay, I gotta hide chat. Sorry. I don't want to diminish you. Yeah. Okay. You're wrong. But, alright. Okay. Okay, what was it talking about? Yeah, some of the what were they called again? The Lineage support gems are the most ridiculous. Like, one of them specifically that I'm thinking of is quite literally like the strongest item I've ever seen in PoE, and it's a support gem. It's pretty wild. It's both exciting and kind of scary in terms of power creep. It's going to be super fun to play with. I imagine it'll be incredibly expensive, but it's a single support gem that gives like 700% more damage and has no downside, and it can be used multiple times. It has no, and it's also not contingent on anything, nor is it a proc. Just no downside, 700% more on the hardest mobs in the game. It saves you multiple, like, just crazy, crazy, crazy. We'll get to the specifics when we go through them all. I don't care if chat's on YouTube. I just don't want to have to, when I read people's comments like that, I feel incentivized to like explain to them, but it's just, if somebody feels like their immediate reaction to being told how something works by the foremost expert of that thing in the world that is completely ignorant of the operation of that market, has no firsthand or intellectual experience pertaining to it, and their initial reaction is to tell them why they're wrong because of some, I don't know, unfulfilled self-need or whatever. Maybe, I don't know. It's just like, that's not a movable middle. That person's not going to, like, you know what I mean? They're just, people don't know what they don't know. And when someone's first reaction to being informed on something that they're ignorant of is to try and tell that other person with no basis for for this, why they're wrong, that's probably not a person who's very teachable, or you know, it's not maybe not teachable, but somebody who's not very concerned with being informed on something. Celebrating ignorance is not a virtue. Anyways, moving on. During the end game, you'll be able to find some new and extremely powerful support gems. The Lineage support. Think of them like unique items, but for supports, just like unique items, some of them are available from the regular drop pool, and some come from specific bosses. Others are just straight up power upgrades. There are 40 Lineage supports that are being throughout the end game. There is a lot to discover. On PoEDB here, they only showcase 3 of them. On PoEDB, they actually have a bunch of them on here. If you go to the Lineage support gems, I think it has like 8 or 9 of them listed. Wait, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm so thirsty. I need to, well, here, sorry. I'll show you guys the one because I know this is a YouTube video, but I need to go to the bathroom and get a glass of water. I've been going for an hour straight. I'm just going to edit this video to take out this. I need a 5-minute break to have a cigarette and piss and to give my voice box a rest. I've been ranting for like 14 hours straight, and it's really actually starting to hurt. But here's the gem I was talking about. Oh, nope, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Rocky, there's. All right. This support gem here, Rakiata's Flow. Item level 65, cost multiplier 120%. That's not even bad. Support gem. Supports skills that cause damaging hits, causing those hits to treat enemy elemental resistances as inverted. Hits with supported skills treat enemy monster elemental resistances values as inverted. Now you'll notice that doesn't have a chance to. It's not for a specific element. It's for all elements. It has no like proc rate. It has no downside. And it's just a support gem, so you could theoretically apply this to multiple skills. Now, I'm going to show you the math on this quickly in case what I'm showing is kind of abstract. Now, normally to deal with resistances, you would have curses, you have exposure, you have penetration, and they tend to, all 3 of these tend to apply to one element. Now, the hardest mobs in the game are the ones that have the most resistances. Typically, pinnacle bosses like the Arbiter Tier 4 has 75 to all elemental reses. The highest res any mob in the game has is 75. A lot of the pinnacle bosses actually don't have that much res. Some of them have no res at all. There's 3 of them: Trial Master, Arbiter, and there's one other one, I can't remember which one, that has 75 res. So let's assume it's the hardest mob in the game, right? So a pinnacle boss, hardest content in the game, that has the highest capacity to resist elemental damage. Now, in a normal scenario, if I did, let's say, 1 million damage, okay, and I have no investment into curses, exposure, or penetration, that 1 million damage with 75 res would then go to 250k damage, right? It's because they resist 75% of it. Now, with this one support gem, rather than that mob having 75 res, it goes to minus 75 res. Now, what does that do? Instead of making it take 750,000 less from my 1 million, it now makes it take 750,000 more from the 1 million, meaning it does 1,750,000 damage. That is 7 times the amount of damage as it would have had with 0 investment otherwise. But what makes this especially crazy is the fact that it applies to all 3 elements, okay? And the strongest mobs in the game are the ones that it works the best on. And it also saves you multiple support gems, multiple curses, multiple reservations, has no downside, has a very low multiplier, and the worst case scenario, if you're fighting a mob that has 0 res, it just does 0. It doesn't have like a negative whatever. But it actually actively discourages you from scaling otherwise. Like it actively, if you were to have a curse or exposure or penetration, it would actually make that gem worse. So not only does it save you from this, it actually encourages you to invest less into the character's thing. And what is crazy to me is that they actually made exposure worse. They nerfed exposure because exposure was too strong. But then they added a support gem that makes it entirely superfluous and actively discourages you from using it. Sorry, I just looked over at chat and said it's more than that because it's whatever. The only mobs that have 0 res that's going to be relevant to are mobs that are like white mobs, trash mobs. It doesn't have a negative effect, right? Like most mobs don't have 0 res, by the way. If you're in a map, right, you have things like enemies have plus 40 elemental resistance, blah, blah, blah. There's a variety of things that can apply. Most mobs don't have 0 res. Even if it has 10 res, right? And that's it. Let's say it's a mob with 10 resistance, okay? The 10 goes to minus 10. You hit it for 1 million. Instead of doing 900K, you do 1.1 mil, right? That is 22% more damage. So it's like against the worst mobs in the game, like the least scalable, the ones that you're probably one-shotting anyway, it still does basically like the same as any other support gem, a lot more than a lot of them with no conditions. And again, here's another thing too. It allows you to Trinity. Like Trinity is one of the harder things to use because if you're trying to get Trinity to apply to your character, you want to have a relative balance between fire, cold, and lightning. A lot of the time you just get like fire and cold to be similar because lightning has such a wide range. It's not uncommon for lightning to like hit for, let's say, for like 1 instead, like it's 1 to 1 million. Eventually it's going to hit for the 1. So even a moderate amount of fire or cold damage will be the higher hit in that single scenario. And so it would gain resonance. So you can kind of cheese it that way. And so typically in a build like that, you would invest into penetration or elemental resistance reduction for the lightning because it's still your dominant damage while still getting the more elemental damage from Trinity. But again, if you did actually wanted to do a perfectly distributed one where you're doing like an equal amount of fire, cold, and lightning damage, you would normally have to invest into like 3 different forms of penetration or multiple forms of exposure and multiple curses. And if you did want to get one where it applied to all 3 of them, right? Like currently there is a rune which applies to weapons, right? And you know how much penetration that gives? 15%. So you can penetrate 15 res and sacrifice your weapons rune slot. Or you can get an item, you can get 1 support gem that does the same thing as there's a pair of unique gloves that makes it so your penetration can go all the way down to minus 50. So this does the same thing as that unique pair of gloves times 50% and 5 weapon support gems. Sorry, you'd have to penetrate to a minus 75, so that'd be 10 weapon supports. The point is the opportunity cost that it presents, it solves, is insane. And again, in the hardest scenarios in the game is where it becomes more effective. It's literally like the craziest thing I've ever seen, item-wise. I don't know how much this is going to cost. I don't know how rare these are. But the sheer amount of power creep that is provided by this, not only in what it does by itself, but the fact that you now no longer need to invest into any other forms of penetration or reduction or curses. You don't need to use like the weapon support. You get to save yourself a ton of passive points. Maybe you're Megalomaniac. Maybe it's an enchantment. You don't need to use shitty unique items like Beacon of Aziz or Sacred Flame. It's just like, it just, whoa, this is really strong. They unified the curses? Okay, sorry. Either way, it still saves you a curse. Ooh. I don't know how rare this is going to be, but from the stuff I've seen so far, this is for sure the strongest, just at face value. The potential, like just what it provides by itself. Obviously, I have my sort of concerns with what with the crafting stuff. See, crafting is a bit more innocuous than things like that gem. I think most of you, when you look at that gem and I give that explanation, that immediately resonates with you because it's 1 support gem and it's like 1 calculation. The reason why crafting changes and currency changes can be a little bit more under the radar is because by themselves, they're not a problem basically ever, right? It's the fact that when you combine a new base with an additional socket, with an additional drop-only modifier, with a guaranteed fracture, with a guaranteed second drop-only modifier, with a guaranteed third drop-only modifier, with guaranteed triple tier 1 prefixes, with guaranteed triple tier 1 suffixes, with guaranteed sanctification, with guaranteed, you know what I mean? It's the fact that you can, with a guaranteed removal of the lower item level mods, with a guaranteed targeting of prefixes, where the guaranteed rolling up from the thing, right? It's the fact that each one of these things layers and layers and layers. And so if you just look at it from the one link in the chain and you don't know the full extent of it, right? It's a lot harder to grasp that, especially if you don't have a first-hand experience with it. And so that's why I think I get so vocal about some of the things, like the potential implications of crafting changes. Obviously, I love crafting, but it's because they're so much more innocuous than something like a support gem where it's like, oh, damage go up. This is strong. And this is such a large change right here. I need to go have a smoke and a glass of water for the people. When I post this on YouTube, I'm just gonna have to edit out this part. Give me 5 minutes, guys. If you guys have any thoughts on that, I'll read them while I'm outside. I just thought that was so crazy, though. So crazy. So good. Oh, here's another one, the 2. Look at this one. Oh, no, sorry, this one. +1 to level, 10 quality, and a 90% mana multiplier. Ah. So you could do like cast on crit, where the quality also gives reduction in the reservation, and this gives a 90% multiplier. So cast on crit, where the quality gives it 10% less cost. So this quality would make it 15% less cost after having a 90% multiplier. So the 100 would go to 90, and then that would be times 0.85. It's like you can change that to 76 reservation from that one gem. That's crazy, right? Not to mention there's tons of like just regular skills that get a lot of benefit from quality too. It's a hard thing to find, right? There's very like you can get this that what's it called? Not a rune, soul core or the talisman that gives 2% quality on the chest. Best case scenario, you have a that chest with 5 sockets if it's corrupted, where you put 5 of them in there, but they're like 200 divs each, so that can give you 10% quality. Or you play a gem, what do you call it? A gem, gemling legionnaire. Those are like the only 2 ways that you can get quality to support gems, or to yeah. Sorry, outside of corrupted. With corruptions, you can get +3 quality, but the fact that it gives a skill level, quality, and reservation, it's crazy. All right, yeah, sorry. I get really like, I care about this shit. I'm passionate about the game. My intellectual pursuits often supersede my physical necessities. I'll be right back, guys. Okay. Where was I? All right, so where did we leave off? We left off on the unique items. So they're adding some new uniques here on PoEDB. There's a couple additional ones that they have here. Hinekora's Sight, and not Darkness Enthroned, the Undying Hada. Looks like they're adding a new Timeless Jewel with seeds associated with it. That's kind of cool. Oh yeah, Lineage supports, right? Thank you. New endgame maps, new rewards, Lineage support gems. Yeah, these are fucking crazy. Let's go through them all here quickly, because they've got an exhaustive list. Well, not necessarily exhaustive, but here's the ones that have been data mined at least. So Ratha's Assault. Supported crossbow ammunition skills cannot reload. Supported skills load 3 bolts when you dodge. Supported skills load an additional 3 bolts. Zarok's Refrain. Supported spells echo 2 times. Shion's Temper. Gain 1 wild shard on casting a supported spell. Supported skills have a 20% chance to fire 8 additional projectiles in a circle per wild shard. All the wild shards are lost when supported skills fire projectiles in a circle. Diala's Desire we went over. Arjun's Metal, 35% chance to load a bolt into all crossbow skills on dealing a killing blow with supported skill. Tahoa's Tending, totems created by supported skills have 50% more max life. Totems created by supported skills trigger Tahoa's Vengeance on death. Rakiata's Flow we went over. Diala's Desire, I don't know why they have this listed twice here, but same one. Kurgal's Leash, gain Unholy Might for 5 seconds on commanding minions from supported skills. Minions from supported skills gain Unholy Might for 5 seconds when commanded. Unholy Might gives 30% damage added as extra chaos. Garukan's Resolve, attack critical hit chance with supported skills bifurcates. Supported skills become usable after you have moved 20 meters. Supported skills become unusable again after use. Corrupted Blood deals. I don't know what it says. Corrupted Blood deal 25% of your strength as physical damage per second. Corrupted Blood duration is 5 seconds. Lose 2% of maximum life per Corrupted Blood inflicted by supported skills. Supported War Cries inflict 5 Corrupted Blood debuffs. Supported skills trigger ice fragments on killing frozen enemies. And then this is perfected, so that means that's the different gems. So those ones, this would be the last one. So from Frozen Spite up into Ratha's Assault, those are the what are they called again now? They're called Lineage support gems. Asynchronous trade. Asynchronous trade is something people have wanted for a very long time. In terms of what the downstream consequences are from this with respect to overall market volatility, action, potential botting. You know, how many more people engage with the economy now, or people that have, you know, asserted or pontificated about their allegiance to just mapping ethically and trade as a waste, and it's not actually playing the game and stuff, who might have low-key just been pissed off by the friction that was implemented about it. Maybe they're going to be incredibly economically active now through trade and crafting because all of those quality of life features are removed. I think the upside potential this presents, not only with new player retention, but also the inclusion into the economy at large for people that were otherwise turned off by it, simply not simply by the like out of principle, but just because of the amount of effort and third-party resources and the amount of fuckery that goes on with price fixing and people ignoring and fake listings and swapping and all that kind of stuff. I think the upside here is huge. I think that this was probably just something that eventually it was going to happen. I think, in 2025, not having that, I understand why it was in place, and there's a lot of really good reasons why it was in place. But I think that this is just, again, until we have like a full-fledged some time period to see what the, with every intended consequence has 10 unintended consequences. And even in something like this, where it's like I've dedicated, 13 years of my life to a singular pursuit, that this, probably more like this change probably impacts me more than like any other person on the planet. If you're just to look at like the net impact it has on their life, or like on their play style in terms of time spent and focus and whatever. I cannot stress how big of a radical change this is for the game itself. And I am optimistic because I think the upside is huge. And I think that in terms of onboarding and keeping a lot of people, and also introducing people to a side of the game they may have otherwise been averse to, this is just, there's so much potential good that can come from it. I hesitate to speak about it so glowingly because, as I said, there's always, for every one intended effect, there's 10 unintended ones. And there are definitely potential downsides to this. A lot of which have to do with automation and botting and stuff like that. But I don't even want to say cautiously optimistic. I'm really excited to see how this plays out, and I'm super, super excited to engage with it. but I don't want to, especially because I feel like this specific topic is something that people will more so than when like when I give my opinion on different like build changes or gem changes, I feel like there would be a lot of weight given to what I say on this specific change, given my area of focus for such a long time. And my more serious tone here is just because I want to maintain some objectivity and neutrality in engaging with it. I don't want to be like fear mongering over the potential downsides, and I also don't want to glaze the change as if there aren't any potential downsides. So it's really one of those things that we'll have to see how it plays out. Just from like a an implementation perspective, from what I understand, if you have premium tabs that have been purchased prior to the release of this, you can convert those premium tabs into ones whereby you can list items offline on them, or not even offline, but just list them without having to actively engage in them. For myself, it is that's fantastic because I don't ever buy MTXs or supporter packs really, but I have spent like thousands of dollars on stash tabs. I have like 160 stash tabs that are all premium. So your boy's gonna have a lot of items listed offline. In PoE 1, I have like literally like 3,500 tabs of shit and like 20,000 to 30,000 mirrors worth of stuff that like I'm not bothered to like. You know what? I actually a lot of people I think are gonna have standard, like not care about standard, but because you can have things listed on standard and not have to actively log over or like deal with people there. I think a lot of people will actually have some, it's not like it requires micromanagement. It's like in between leagues for the 4 days, you can kind of like set it and forget it, right? And so I think there'll be a lot of people actually on standard. The people who actually actively play standard is such a small portion of the overall population that really generally get sort of derided and disregarded in pretty much every consideration. But for those people, I'm actually really happy because they're going to have a lot, even though I'm not one of them. This is probably going to impact them more than anybody else in terms of like the percentage effect of change it'll have because, very few, like even myself, like I get messages sometimes to sell things on standard that they're like multiple mirrors and I still can't even be bothered because I just don't want to log over. And so I can imagine it's incredibly frustrating being somebody who plays there full time, seeing somebody's online, they're the only one who has an item you have, and they're unwilling to spend 30 seconds to log over. I can imagine that being terribly frustrating. So this is great for them, but it's also people that are just general collectors of things too, right? Like if you want to put together like a legacy item character or buy demigod sets or alt arts or whatever, if those get implemented in PoE 2. Demigods already have been, but altars, I mean. This will give you a capacity to like build towards that goal in a way that maybe makes some people like a lot of like towards the end of leagues, people are often have like this sort of nihilistic view of things like who cares? It's all meaningless. It's pointless. The league's about to end. Nobody cares about standard. Blah blah blah. Like a lot of people will just like corrupt all their stuff or give it away, or after like an arbitrary amount of time, they pretend like the league doesn't end because someone has convinced them that it's not worthy anymore. I think this will do a lot to extend the perception of value and of like people will be more incentivized to care, I guess, about their long-term possessions and like not feel as like when the hype dies down, right? It can often feel a little meaningless, I think, to some people because they're not being like encouraged through externalities. I think that's a flawed way of thinking because if you're not enjoying something for its own enjoyment's sake, then what are you doing? But the reality is a lot of people tend to take consensus as anything that is not consensus as sacrosanct, despite its detachment from any objectivity or an understanding that it's wholly subjective. So to try to speak to it with a sweeping generality is a moot point. But nonetheless, though, again, I think the upside for this is so massive, and I think for growing the game, growing an audience, for me personally, from a more selfish level, I think that the only potential outcome from this is that a lot of people are going to be a lot more interested in the content I make because they don't have to actively sit there 20 hours a day for it to have meaning to them. So I think that, like, from that more selfish standpoint, I am potentially served very well by this. There are certainly, depending how it rolls out, and the gold cost thing is entirely meaningless. In PoE 2, you can vendor maps or vendor items for gold. So it's like people that are gonna like bought things or whatever. Like yeah. I mean, you can also do the what do you call it, castaway map, where you get like millions of gold per. So that's a rather meaningless kind of uh, barrier to preventing those things. But maybe forcing people to like teleport manually to somebody else's hideout, like as long as people can't run like some sort of script thing that where it like searches for certain mods and automatically buys stuff, I think it'll be okay. That's obviously a concern there, that people have some form of automation that is parsing through specific thresholds that automatically buys things under a certain amount of uh, uh, under a certain cost, or sells it. You know what I mean? As long as automation is done, uh, I can't imagine. And sorry that I'm circling around similar points here for so long. I can't stress to you enough how opposed Chris Wilson was to this, the original lead designer for the game, who left about a year ago. This was like his number one thing. Like he was, and people would like yell for this, and he was adamant about it. Like he actively was like, it will ruin the game. This has to be there. The friction needs to be there. And Chris Wilson, I was not a man of little wisdom, and so I don't think the successors to that would disregard the downside implications over the course of the past year and a bit, since these John and Mark have been more so the leads. Every league that they've introduced has had some major oversights to it. I actually think the one that was probably the best rollout, though, was Faustus being released. A lot of the league mechanics have had like bugs in them or exploits cooked in that have gained some disproportionate power, or like things have been late or whatever. They're not immune to criticism. You can understand why these things happen, especially with the size of the company and the I mean, by Jonathan's own admission, they have two people who balance the endgame for both PoE 1 and PoE 2, right? So despite the fact the company's grown and has that Tencent ownership, it's still a rather small group of people. And it's not like, when you have these forced deadlines, which, as I said, they've been quote unquote late for a lot of them, but it's better that something's released late, but it's done properly. This is not something that would have gone, from my perspective, at least. I can't imagine these guys doing this haphazardly and without consideration for what has been one of like the strongest oppositions internally as a company for literally 13 years or whatever. And so again, I really think, in the same way that when Faustus was introduced, it was like one of the only things that was like kind of seamless. I can't really think of it. Maybe somebody in chat can correct me here. I don't remember there ever being any kind of like exploit or bug or fuckery with Faustus at all. It was like one of the few things in the past like year, I think, that kind of just went off without a hitch. And it's not like they couldn't have had, if you are interested, you can, I have a YouTube video when they announced the currency exchange. I actually on my YouTube, because they didn't specify in the same way that they haven't really specified how the asynchronous trading will work here. They didn't really specify how it was going to be implemented. So naturally, I did what I feel like is sort of incumbent upon me to do, given my content focus, and I made a video being like, here are the potential, like obviously the upsides to something like this are obvious to everyone, but here are the potential manifestations that have very different consequences, and here are potential things that could be taken advantage of if these aren't addressed properly, and blah blah blah. And lo and behold, it went off without a hitch. So where's that video? Here. All right, what's up, guys? Belton here, back with part Trade Savior or Cheater's Paradise, the new currency exchange in Kalgur. Auction house reveal summary: the good, the bad, the unknown, and suggestions. So it's an hour and 10 minute long video of me like going through every possible manifestation I thought could be introduced with this, and potential oversights, talking about like book orders, buy orders, and fixed pricing things, and it change, giving analogous references to like fucking Bloomberg terminals and financial things. And at the end of the day, they did think these things through, and so I I'm gonna give them what I think is a well-deserved benefit of the doubt. I cannot overstress how big of a departure this is from their overall kind of philosophy on this historically. I do think again it was time. It's just the times have changed, and I think they recognize that. And this is probably the biggest. I would say probably the single biggest request I can think of people having for years, years and years and years and years. So I know how many people will be happy with this. Again, even though I'm maintaining what I'm intending on being a fairly neutral tone while I talk about it, don't my my optimism is high. My caution for that optimism is existent, but my empiricism, my experience tells me that of any of the changes they're making, this is the one they've probably thought through the most. Because this is not a small departure, and this is a really, really big thing. And yeah, so we'll see how it goes. I hope that every upside I mentioned it turns out to be true, and I hope every downside I mentioned, which I didn't really, I don't want to dwell on the potential bad reasons for this, because unlike a lot of the time with crafting things, I just think they overall, like, they just don't, not that they don't put enough thought into it. I just think that they don't connect the dots, maybe because they don't have the, there's just a lot of links in that chain kind of thing. But this is something that I know that they would have put every consideration into, and so I'm really, really anxious, not anxious, but eager. I'm eager. I'd be really curious to know what you guys think about this for the people who are seeing this on YouTube. I'm going to be honest, I don't have a capacity to parse through patch notes quickly, and I know that this video is going to be, it's already an hour and 40 minutes long. I think I'm just going to post, and for those of you watching on Twitch right now, I think I'm just going to post unfiltered reactions to everything as I go through them and make like a 5-part series. I don't think I have the ability to just sit here for like 5 hours straight without standing up to pee or have a glass of water or a cigarette, or to not go off on tangents, or to elaborate on things that I think are important to elaborate on. I know for a lot of people that'll probably turn them off from the video, but I'll at least rest easy knowing that I've spoken my piece on things that I think need to be spoken of. But that way as well, I can progress through this without having to revisit it. This is now the 3rd time I've attempted to do this, by the way. And I've now spent 14 hours recording footage where I go over this. And in this specific scenario here, I actually haven't even finished. I haven't even entered the patch notes. This was literally just the trade reveal. Obviously, we took some tangents here to go off this. And the first time, which took 7 hours in terms of the actual patch notes, this is how far I made it. Here. So from that, I covered that much. Sorry, this much. So I have lots of parts about lots of things. I don't know if you guys find that agreeable. I think this is one of those things where I just kind of have to say fuck it and hope that it finds an audience. But it would take me like days to, like, by the time I was able to go through all the footage and edit it together, the league would be released already. I think past like maybe like 2 to 3 days from now, there's really no value to even making a video like this. So I'd also really like to get people's feedback on some of the things I bring up, and then move on to the next parts too. Like, for example, the potential implications with the Hinekora's locks and the various crafting currencies that have been added. You know, what people think about the asynchronous trade. When we mentioned those crazy support gems there, like what people think about that. Because we kind of done a brief overview, I think, in this video, like a sort of a reasonable summary of what those major changes are. Obviously, specific things I went into in far greater level of detail. Again, what we've reviewed here was literally just this sort of I don't even know what you would call this, but the announcement page, right? So we went through all of these. We just finished the last one, which was the asynchronous trade. I'm thinking that I should probably just stop the recording here, edit out the part where I went for a smoke or whatever, and then post that as just like a part one, and then tomorrow or whenever I could then do the next one where I go through the patch notes. Maybe I like set like a timer where it's like I go through like an hour and a half, put that as a cap, a hard cap for the length of the video, and then I move on to the next part and start that recording. That way, if I ever have to like go for a break or whatever, or you know, if I do go off on a really long tangent, it's something that's a little bit more insular, so I can prevent it easier. While I'm saying this as sort of a rhetorical feedback kind of thing, I think that's just what I'm going to do. I'm just letting you guys know this on Twitch now because I know some of you have been here for like 12 hours. For the people on YouTube, I'm sorry for the winding diatribes and kind of popping around on topics here. This is just, there's so much stuff. And, you know, for those of you who do value my insights where they exist on whatever I'm talking about, which I would think are probably the people that would even be sticking around to hear this point right now. I would assume just by your very presence, an hour and 40 minutes into a video, you probably fall into that camp. I'm not, my intention's not to like, you know, stretch a video into 5 videos to like get more clicks or money or whatever. But more so that I can break this down into manageable parts where I can get it out in time and to actually have it consumable. So I think this is a good stopping point for the people on YouTube who are watching this. I don't have like editing software, but on YouTube I can cut certain parts out. So I did go for a smoke and a pay and stuff earlier. I'll try to cut that part out. So there might be some parts in this that are kind of like a little rough edit where I sort of go off on that. I will, now that I've got this idea in my mind to kind of keep this into sections where I'll post it in part 1, part 2, whatever. The future ones, which there will be tomorrow, obviously. Definitely for at least part 2 and likely part 3. We will make sure that those are tightened up a bit and have less of the jumping around. So I'm going to end the recording here. For people on YouTube, let me know what you thought about what we talked about so far. If there's things you disagree with me on in terms of what I said, or things you think I might be overlooking in the things we covered so far, please let me know. If you're new to the game, or if you're thinking about returning for PoE 2 now because of this announcement, and you've not subbed to the channel, if you're interested in crafting or the economy or just the game at large, I think that there'd be a lot of value potential to be added if you decided to sub, but leave that up to you. I'd appreciate it. And hope you guys enjoyed the sort of rambling discussions here, and we'll see you for part 2. So take care, YouTube. Chat soon. Ciao. Wait, ciao sounds kind of lame. Not ciao. Peace. Yeah, we'll go with that one. I'm cool as hell. All right, see you, boys.